Question 1. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the VMware vRealize Operation 7.5 environment collects detailed performance metrics and configuration data for virtual machines and hosts. Given the organization's adherence to strict data privacy regulations that mandate data minimization and defined retention periods for sensitive information, which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance without compromising essential monitoring capabilities? Option A. Configure vRops data collection to include all available metrics and set a long data retention policy to ensure historical data is always available for analysis. Option B. Disable all data collection within vRops to eliminate any potential for collecting sensitive information. Option C. Implement granular role-based access controls within vRops. Restrict data collection to only those metrics directly relevant to operational performance and security posture, and configure data retention policies to align with regulatory mandates. Option D. Rely on the default vRops configuration settings, assuming they are designed to meet general compliance standards. Correct answer is A. Configure vRops data collection to include all available metrics and set a long data retention policy to ensure historical data is always available for analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the operational needs of a VMware vRealize Operations (vRops) environment with the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, specifically within the context of the 5v0-34. 19 exams implied jurisdiction, which we will assume for this exercise, is a hypothetical jurisdiction with strict data privacy and security mandates analogous to GDPR or HIPAA, as the exam is VMware-focused and often relates to enterprise environments. The core challenge lies in ensuring that vRops, a powerful monitoring and management tool, does not inadvertently create compliance risks through its data collection, retention, or access control mechanisms. Organizations must proactively identify and mitigate these risks to avoid significant penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate configuration and operational procedures that align with both technical efficacy and regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of vRops data collection policies, retention schedule, and access controls against the specific mandates of the relevant regulatory framework. This includes understanding what types of data vRops collects, e.g., performance metrics, configuration details, logs, how long this data is retained, and who has access to it. Best professional practice dictates configuring vRops to collect only the minimum necessary data for operational and compliance monitoring, setting appropriate data retention periods that align with legal requirements, e.g., not retaining sensitive data longer than legally permissible, and implementing robust role-based access control (RBAC) to ensure only authorized personnel can view or modify sensitive information. This proactive, risk-based approach directly addresses regulatory obligations by minimizing the potential for data breaches or non-compliance due to excessive data collection or inappropriate access. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on default vRops configurations without any customization or review. This is professionally unacceptable because default settings are often designed for broad applicability and may not meet the specific, granular requirements of a particular regulatory framework. This could lead to overcollection of sensitive data, retention of data beyond legal limits, or granting broader access than necessary, all of which constitute regulatory and ethical failures. Another incorrect approach is to disable all data collection in vRops to avoid potential compliance issues. While seemingly a safe option, this is professionally unacceptable as it severely cripples vRops' core functionality, rendering it ineffective for its intended purpose of performance monitoring, capacity planning, and operational troubleshooting. This failure to leverage the tool's capabilities for operational efficiency while attempting to achieve compliance demonstrates a misunderstanding of the balance required and a lack of proactive risk mitigation. A third incorrect approach is to assume that all data collected by vRops is automatically compliant. This is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. Compliance is not an inherent state of a tool but a result of its proper configuration, ongoing management, and adherence to established policies. Without a deliberate process to map VROps data handling to regulatory requirements, assumptions of compliance are unfounded and dangerous. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based methodology. This involves 1. Identifying applicable regulations. Understand the specific data privacy, security, and retention laws relevant to the organization's operations and the data processed by VROps. 2. Data inventory and classification. Determine what types of data VROps collects and classify them according to their sensitivity and regulatory implications. 3. Policy alignment. Map VROps configurations, collection, retention, access to regulatory requirements. 4. Configuration and implementation. Implement VROps settings that meet these aligned policies, prioritizing data minimization and least privilege access. 5. Ongoing monitoring and auditing. Regularly review VROps configurations and logs to ensure continued compliance and to detect any deviations or potential risks. 6. Documentation. Maintain thorough documentation of all compliance-related configurations and decisions. Question 2. Examination of the data shows a sudden and unexplained spike in resource utilization for a critical application cluster monitored by VMware vRealize Operations 7.5, occurring outside of scheduled maintenance windows and without any apparent user-initiated activity. The spike is causing minor performance degradation, but the application remains functional. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the system administrator? Option A. Share the raw utilization data with the application development team via instant message to get their immediate feedback on potential causes. Option B. Monitor the situation for a few hours to see if the anomaly resolves itself before taking any action. Option C. Immediately revert recent configuration changes made to the application servers, as these are the most likely cause of the utilization spike. Option D. Document the anomaly. Correlate it with any recent system changes or events within vRealize operations, and report it through the established incident management process for investigation. The correct answer is D. Document the anomaly, correlate it with any recent system changes or events within vRealize operations, and report it through the established incident management process for investigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between the immediate need to address a critical performance issue and the established procedures for data handling and reporting. The pressure to resolve the problem quickly could tempt an individual to bypass proper channels, potentially compromising data integrity and regulatory compliance. The ethical dilemma lies in balancing urgency with accountability and transparency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the observed anomaly, correlating it with known system events or changes, and then reporting it through the designated channels for investigation and resolution. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that all actions are traceable, auditable, and adhere to established governance frameworks. In the context of VMware vRealize Operations 7.5, this means leveraging its built-in capabilities for troubleshooting and incident management, and then escalating findings according to organizational policy, which is implicitly guided by general IT governance principles that emphasize data accuracy and process adherence. This approach upholds the integrity of the monitoring system and the data it provides, which is crucial for informed decision-making and compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Taking immediate corrective action without proper documentation or notification is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses established incident response protocols. This can lead to a lack of understanding of the root cause, potential for introducing new issues, and an inability to reconstruct the event for audit or post-mortem analysis. It violates the principle of accountability and can obscure critical performance trends. Sharing raw, unverified data with external parties or colleagues outside the authorized incident response team is also professionally unsound. This can lead to misinterpretation of the data, unauthorized disclosure of potentially sensitive operational information, and can undermine the formal reporting structure. It breaches confidentiality and can create confusion regarding the official status of the issue. Ignoring the anomaly because it is not immediately impacting end users is a failure to proactively manage the environment. While not causing immediate disruption, the underlying issue could escalate, leading to more severe problems later. This approach neglects the preventative and predictive capabilities of vRealize operations and demonstrates a lack of diligence in maintaining system health and performance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the established incident management and data handling policies within their organization. The decision-making process should involve 1. Recognizing the anomaly and its potential impact. 2. Consulting available documentation and system logs within vRealize operations to gather preliminary information. 3. Following the defined escalation and reporting procedures. 4. Collaborating with the appropriate teams for investigation and resolution, ensuring all steps are documented. This systematic approach ensures that actions are compliant, effective, and contribute to a robust operational environment. Question 3. Performance analysis shows a consistent increase in latency for virtual machine disk I/O across multiple clusters managed by VMware vRealize operations. The alerts indicate a potential performance degradation, but the specific cause is not immediately apparent from the initial notifications. What is the most appropriate and compliant course of action to address this situation? Option A. Immediately initiate a broad configuration change across all affected vSphere clusters to increase disk cache settings, as this is a common cause of latency. Option B. Utilize VMware vRealize operations advanced troubleshooting features, including metric correlation, anomaly detection, and historical trend analysis, to pinpoint the root cause of the increased latency before implementing any remediation steps. Option C. Wait for user complaints or a critical failure to occur before investigating, as the current latency may be within acceptable operational tolerances. Option D. Apply a hotfix to the storage array firmware for all connected data stores, as storage issues are often the underlying cause of I/O latency. The correct answer is B. Utilize VMware vRealize operations advanced troubleshooting features, including metric correlation, anomaly detection, and historical trend analysis, to pinpoint the root cause of the increased latency before implementing any remediation steps. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where performance metrics indicate a potential issue, but the root cause is not immediately obvious. The professional must balance the need for immediate action to maintain service availability with the requirement to adhere to established operational procedures and regulatory compliance frameworks. The challenge lies in accurately diagnosing the problem and implementing a solution without introducing new risks or violating established governance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation using the tools and data available within VMware vRealize operations, VROps, to identify the specific cause of the performance degradation. This aligns with best professional practices for IT operations management, which emphasize data-driven decision-making and root cause analysis. Specifically, leveraging VROps capabilities for anomaly detection, metric correlation, and historical trend analysis allows for an accurate diagnosis. Once the root cause is identified, e.g., a specific VM cluster or underlying infrastructure component, remediation steps can be taken in a controlled manner, documented and validated. This methodical approach ensures that the fix addresses the actual problem, minimizes the risk of unintended consequences, and supports auditability, which is crucial for regulatory compliance. Adhering to change management processes, which are often mandated by regulatory frameworks, further solidifies this approach as best practice. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a broad, unverified change across the entire vSphere environment without a clear understanding of the root cause is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses the fundamental principles of IT service management and risk management. It introduces a high probability of unintended consequences, potentially impacting other services or introducing new performance issues. From a regulatory perspective, such an action would likely violate controls related to change management, incident management, and potentially data integrity, as it lacks proper testing and validation. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established operational procedures designed to protect the integrity and availability of IT services. Applying a reactive fix based on anecdotal evidence or a single, isolated metric without comprehensive analysis is also professionally unacceptable. This approach is prone to misdiagnosis and can lead to wasted effort or, worse, exacerbating the problem. It fails to meet the professional standard of thorough investigation and evidence-based decision-making. Regulatory frameworks often require that incidents are managed through a defined process that includes root cause analysis. This approach would likely fall short of those requirements, leaving the organization vulnerable to repeat incidents and audit findings. Ignoring the performance alerts entirely until a critical failure occurs is a severe dereliction of professional duty and a direct violation of operational responsibilities. Proactive monitoring and response are core tenets of IT operations and are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory compliance. This approach not only risks significant service disruption, but also demonstrates a failure to uphold the organization's commitment to service availability and reliability. It would be considered a major compliance failure, as it indicates a lack of effective monitoring and incident prevention mechanisms. Professional reasoning. Professionals in IT operations must adopt a structured, data-driven approach to problem solving. When performance anomalies are detected, the decision-making process should involve 1. Acknowledging and prioritizing the alert based on its potential impact. 2. Utilizing available monitoring and diagnostic tools, like vRealize, to gather comprehensive data. 3. Performing root cause analysis to pinpoint the exact source of the issue. 4. Developing and documenting a remediation plan that addresses the identified root cause. 5. Adhering to established change management procedures for implementing the fix. 6. Validating the effectiveness of the fix and monitoring for recurrence. This process ensures that actions are targeted, effective, and compliant with operational policies and regulatory requirements. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that certain virtual machines within the VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 managed environment are consistently reporting significantly higher resource allocation than their actual utilization metrics suggest, leading to concerns about cost optimization and resource contention. What is the most appropriate next step to address this discrepancy? Option A. Utilize vRealize Operations capacity planning and optimization dashboards to identify specific underutilized resources and recommend targeted deprovisioning or right-sizing actions based on historical performance data. Option B. Immediately initiate a manual process to reduce the allocated resources for all virtual machines flagged by the study, without further investigation. Option C. Disregard the efficiency study findings, assuming the reporting is inaccurate due to the complexity of the vRealize operations deployment. Option D. Conduct a series of ad hoc performance tests on individual virtual machines to gather anecdotal evidence about their resource needs. The correct answer is A. Utilize vRealize Operations capacity planning and optimization dashboards to identify specific underutilized resources and recommend targeted deprovisioning or right-sizing actions based on historical performance data. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential overprovisioning of resources within the VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 environment, impacting cost efficiency and potentially violating internal governance policies related to resource utilization. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing technical optimization with adherence to established financial and operational controls. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the overprovisioning without compromising the performance or availability of critical services monitored by vRealize operations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the findings of the efficiency study by leveraging the analytical capabilities of vRealize operations to identify specific areas of resource overallocation. This method aligns with the principles of responsible IT resource management, which are often implicitly or explicitly governed by internal financial policies and best practice frameworks for cloud and virtualized environments. By using vRealize operations' built-in reporting and analysis tools, the IT team can provide data-driven recommendations for optimization, ensuring that any proposed changes are well justified and minimize risk to ongoing operations. This approach demonstrates a commitment to operational excellence and fiscal responsibility, key tenets of professional IT management. An incorrect approach that involves immediately deprovisioning resources without thorough analysis fails to acknowledge the potential impact on service performance and availability. This could lead to service degradation or outages, violating service level agreements, SLAs, and potentially incurring financial penalties or reputational damage. Such an action would be a direct contravention of responsible IT governance, which mandates a risk-based approach to change management. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the efficiency study findings due to perceived complexity, represents a failure in professional diligence and accountability. It suggests a lack of commitment to continuous improvement and cost optimization, which are essential for maintaining a competitive and efficient IT infrastructure. This inaction could lead to continued wasteful spending and a failure to meet organizational objectives for resource utilization. A further incorrect approach, which is to manually reconfigure resources based on anecdotal evidence rather than data from vRealize operations, introduces a high degree of risk. Manual interventions without proper data analysis are prone to errors and may not address the underlying causes of overprovisioning. This approach lacks the rigor and objectivity required for effective IT management and could lead to unintended consequences, undermining the credibility of the IT department. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Acknowledge and investigate the findings of any efficiency studies or performance reports. 2. Utilize the tools and data available within the IT environment, such as vRealize operations, to gather detailed insights into the identified issues. 3. Develop data-driven hypotheses for the root causes of the inefficiencies. 4. Propose and test solutions in a controlled manner, prioritizing risk mitigation and impact assessment on critical services. 5. Document all changes and their outcomes, and continuously monitor performance to ensure sustained optimization. 6. Communicate findings and recommendations clearly to relevant stakeholders. Question 5. Analysis of how to best optimize the operational processes within a VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 environment, considering the need for continuous improvement while maintaining system stability and data integrity. Option A. Focus solely on cosmetic changes to the vROps dashboard layouts, as these are perceived as low-risk optimizations that can be implemented quickly. Option B. Implement process improvements directly in the production environment after a brief internal discussion, without formal testing or rollback plans, to achieve rapid results. Option C. Defer all process optimization efforts until a major version upgrade of vRealize operations is scheduled to minimize the frequency of changes. Option D. Conduct thorough testing of proposed process optimizations in a dedicated staging environment. Develop comprehensive rollback procedures and implement changes in a phased manner with post-implementation monitoring. The correct answer is B. Implement process improvements directly in the production environment after a brief internal discussion, without formal testing or rollback plans, to achieve rapid results. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for continuous improvement and optimization with the inherent risks and complexities of managing a production VMware vRealize operations (vROps) environment. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that yield tangible benefits without disrupting critical monitoring and analytics functions, potentially leading to compliance issues or service degradation. The professional must navigate the technical aspects of vROps configuration and operational procedures while adhering to established IT governance and operational best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, phased implementation of process improvements, prioritizing those with the highest potential impact and lowest risk. This includes thorough testing in a non-production environment, comprehensive documentation, and a well-defined rollback plan. This methodology aligns with industry best practices for change management and IT service management (ITSM), ensuring that changes are controlled, validated, and reversible. From a regulatory perspective, this structured approach supports auditability and demonstrates due diligence in managing IT systems, which is crucial for maintaining compliance with any relevant IT governance frameworks that might be implicitly or explicitly referenced in the exam scope. It minimizes the risk of unintended consequences that could lead to operational failures or data integrity issues. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing changes directly in the production environment without prior testing or a rollback strategy is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for operational stability and risk management, potentially violating internal IT policies and external compliance requirements that mandate controlled changes and business continuity. Such an approach increases the likelihood of service disruption, data loss, or performance degradation, which could have severe financial and reputational consequences. Furthermore, It undermines the integrity of the vRops system, which is relied upon for monitoring and alerting, thereby compromising the organization's ability to detect and respond to security incidents or performance anomalies. Failing to document changes or the rationale behind them is another critical failure. This lack of documentation hinders future troubleshooting, auditing, and knowledge transfer. It makes it difficult to assess the effectiveness of implemented changes or to revert them if necessary, again posing risks to operational stability and compliance. From an ethical standpoint, it represents a failure to maintain professional standards of accountability and transparency in system management. Adopting a set-it-and-forget-it mentality, where processes are implemented and then left unmonitored or unreviewed, is also problematic. IT environments are dynamic, and processes that were once optimal can become outdated or inefficient. This lack of continuous review can lead to missed opportunities for further optimization and can allow suboptimal configurations to persist, potentially impacting performance and resource utilization, which in turn could have implications for cost management and efficiency reporting. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based iterative approach to process optimization. This involves 1. Understanding the current state and identifying pain points or areas for improvement. 2. Prioritizing potential improvements based on impact, feasibility, and risk. 3. Developing detailed implementation plans including testing and rollback procedures. 4. Executing changes in a controlled manner, preferably during scheduled maintenance windows. 5. Monitoring the impact of changes post-implementation. 6. Documenting all changes and their outcomes. 7. Regularly reviewing and refining processes to ensure continued effectiveness and alignment with organizational goals. This structured decision-making process ensures that optimizations are implemented responsibly, minimizing disruption and maximizing the likelihood of achieving desired outcomes while upholding professional and regulatory standards. Question 6. Quality control measures reveal that VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 is intermittently failing to collect performance metrics for a critical cluster of virtual machines, resulting in gaps in historical data and potentially inaccurate capacity planning reports. The operations team is under pressure to provide an immediate update on resource utilization for an upcoming executive review. Which of the following actions best represents a professional and ethical approach to addressing the situation? Option A. Immediately inform executive management of the data collection issue and request guidance on how to proceed with reporting without attempting any initial troubleshooting. Option B. Instruct vRops to exclude the time period with missing data from all historical performance reports to present a continuous, albeit incomplete, data set. Option C. Immediately investigate the vRops adapter configuration for the affected cluster to identify and resolve the data collection failure, documenting all findings and actions taken before generating any reports. Option D. Manually adjust the data collection interval within vRops for the affected cluster to a more frequent setting, hoping this will resolve the intermittent collection gaps. The correct answer is C. Immediately investigate the vRops adapter configuration for the affected cluster to identify and resolve the data collection failure, documenting all findings and actions taken before generating any reports. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and provide accurate reporting within the context of VMware vRealize Operations, vRops 7.5. The core dilemma lies in balancing the immediate pressure to resolve a performance anomaly with the long-term implications of potentially misrepresenting system health due to incomplete data. The professional is tasked with ensuring that the data presented by vRops is not only readily available, but also a true reflection of the environment's operational status. This requires a nuanced understanding of vRops data collection mechanisms and the potential impact of disruptions on reporting accuracy. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven investigation before making any adjustments that could alter the historical record or future reporting. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of honesty and accuracy in professional IT operations. By systematically troubleshooting the data collection issue, the professional ensures that any subsequent actions are based on a clear understanding of the root cause, thereby preventing the propagation of misinformation. This methodical approach also upholds the integrity of the vRops platform as a reliable source of operational intelligence, which is crucial for informed decision-making by stakeholders. An incorrect approach that involves immediately resetting VROps collection intervals without understanding the cause of the anomaly is professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses the critical step of root cause analysis and could mask underlying issues, leading to a false sense of security. Ethically, this constitutes a failure to act with due diligence and could result in misleading reports about system performance. Furthermore, it violates the principle of responsible system management by potentially exacerbating or creating new problems without proper investigation. Another incorrect approach, such as selectively ignoring data points from the affected period in VROps reports, is also professionally unsound. This is a form of data manipulation that compromises the integrity of historical records. It is ethically problematic as it deliberately omits information to present a more favorable, albeit inaccurate, picture. This practice undermines trust in the reporting system and can lead to flawed strategic decisions based on incomplete or biased data. Finally, an incorrect approach that involves immediately escalating the issue to management without attempting any initial troubleshooting is also a failure in professional responsibility. While escalation is sometimes necessary, it should be a considered step after reasonable initial efforts have been made. Failing to conduct even basic diagnostics demonstrates a lack of initiative and an abdication of the professional's duty to resolve operational issues. This can lead to unnecessary alarm and inefficient use of management resources. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the observed anomaly. Second, consult available documentation and system logs to understand the normal operation of the relevant VROps components. Third, perform targeted troubleshooting steps to identify the root cause of the data collection issue. Fourth, document all findings and actions taken. Fifth, if the issue cannot be resolved through standard procedures, then escalate with a clear explanation of the problem and the steps already attempted. This systematic process ensures that actions are deliberate, informed, and ethically sound, prioritizing data integrity and accurate reporting. Question 7. Research into optimizing the alert management process within VMware vRealize Operations 7. 5. To reduce noise and improve incident response times, what is the most effective and compliant strategy? Option A. Manually adjust alert thresholds for all critical alerts based on recent operational experience, disabling any alerts that have not triggered in the last quarter. Option B. Analyze alert definitions and thresholds within VROps, leveraging its anomaly detection and correlation capabilities to refine alert triggers and suppression rules based on historical data and defined operational policies. Option C. Implement a blanket policy to reduce the severity of all non-critical alerts to informational, regardless of their underlying cause or potential impact. Option D. Rely on external, non-VROps-specific ITIL best practice guides to reconfigure alert policies without validating against VROps performance metrics or current environment behavior. The correct answer is B. Analyze alert definitions and thresholds within VROps, leveraging its anomaly detection and correlation capabilities to refine alert triggers and suppression rules based on historical data and defined operational policies. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, optimizing processes within a regulated environment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain compliance with VMware-specific operational guidelines and best practices, as implicitly governed by the 5V0-34. 19. Exam scope. The regulatory framework for this exam is the VMware Technical Documentation and Certification Objectives, which dictate how vRealize operations, VROps, should be configured and utilized for effective performance and management. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core objective of process optimization within the context of VROps capabilities. It focuses on leveraging the tool's built-in features for automated analysis and remediation, which aligns with the principles of efficient and compliant operations. This approach ensures that optimizations are data-driven, repeatable, and auditable, minimizing the risk of introducing new issues or violating operational standards. Incorrect approaches fail because they either bypass the intended use of VROps, introduce manual processes that are prone to error and lack auditability, or rely on assumptions rather than data. Manually reconfiguring alerts without understanding their impact on the overall monitoring strategy can lead to alert fatigue or missed critical events, violating the principle of effective monitoring. Implementing changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or without proper testing introduces significant risk and deviates from a data-driven, compliant operational model. Relying on outdated documentation, generic best practices, without considering the specific vRops version and its capabilities can lead to suboptimal configurations and potential compliance gaps. The professional reasoning process should involve a thorough understanding of the vRops functionalities relevant to process optimization, a clear definition of the desired outcomes, and a systematic approach to implementation and validation. This includes 1. Assessing the current state using vRops data. 2. Identifying specific areas for optimization based on performance metrics and compliance requirements. 3. Planning changes with a focus on leveraging vRops automation and reporting. 4. Implementing changes in a controlled manner. And 5. Validating the impact through ongoing monitoring and analysis within vRops. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates that while critical services are generally available, there are subtle, intermittent performance degradations impacting user experience that are not being proactively identified or addressed by current monitoring, which approach within VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 would best address this concern by optimizing process efficiency. Option A. Configure static, high-threshold alerts for key resource utilization metrics across all virtual machines to trigger notifications only when resources are critically depleted. Option B. Focus solely on optimizing the performance of individual virtual machines based on their current CPU and memory utilization, without correlating these metrics with application-level performance. Option C. Implement advanced anomaly detection and predictive analytics to identify deviations from normal performance baselines and forecast potential issues before they impact users. Option D. Conduct broad, system-wide performance tuning exercises on a regular schedule, regardless of specific performance indicators or stakeholder feedback. The correct answer is C. Implement advanced anomaly detection and predictive analytics to identify deviations from normal performance baselines and forecast potential issues before they impact users. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where performance metrics, while seemingly adequate, are not meeting the nuanced expectations of key stakeholders. The challenge lies in translating subjective feedback into actionable, objective improvements within the constraints of a specific technology like VMware vRealize Operations, vRops. 7.5. The professional must balance technical capabilities with business needs, ensuring that optimization efforts are aligned with strategic goals and deliver tangible value, rather than just maintaining a status quo. The risk is investing resources in solutions that do not address the root cause or fail to achieve the desired business outcomes, leading to continued dissatisfaction and potential underutilization of the vRops platform. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on leveraging vRops' advanced capabilities for proactive anomaly detection and predictive analytics. By establishing baseline performance and identifying deviations that impact user experience or application availability, even if not causing outright failures, the system can be optimized before critical issues arise. This aligns with best practices in IT service management and operational excellence, aiming to enhance system resilience and performance proactively. Specifically, using vRops to analyze historical data for trends, correlate events across different layers of the infrastructure, and set intelligent alerts based on deviations from normal behavior directly addresses the stakeholders' concern about subtle performance degradations. This approach is professionally sound, as it moves beyond reactive troubleshooting to a more strategic, preventative operational model, maximizing the return on investment in vRops. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on static threshold alerts. This method is reactive and often only flags issues once they have already impacted performance significantly, failing to address the subtle degradation stakeholders are experiencing. It lacks the predictive and analytical depth required to understand the underlying causes of performance drift. Ethically, this can lead to a failure to meet service-level expectations, potentially breaching implicit or explicit service agreements. Another incorrect approach is to focus only on resource utilization metrics without considering application-specific performance indicators or user experience. High resource utilization might be normal for certain workloads, but if it correlates with increased latency or reduced throughput, it indicates an optimization opportunity. Ignoring these correlations means missing critical insights into performance bottlenecks. This approach is professionally deficient as it prioritizes raw resource metrics over actual service delivery, which is the ultimate goal of IT operations. A third incorrect approach is to implement broad, system-wide performance tuning without a clear understanding of the specific applications or services affected by the stakeholder feedback. This can lead to unintended consequences, negatively impacting other workloads or introducing new performance issues. It represents a lack of targeted analysis and a failure to apply the principle of least change, which is a cornerstone of stable IT operations. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to conduct proper root cause analysis. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the stakeholders' concerns, seeking specific examples and impact. Then, they should leverage the diagnostic and analytical capabilities of vRops to gather objective data. This involves exploring historical performance trends, correlating metrics across different components, and identifying anomalies. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that offer proactive identification and resolution of performance issues, align with business objectives, and are supported by data-driven insights from vRops. This systematic, data-informed approach ensures that optimization efforts are effective, efficient, and demonstrably beneficial. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to deploying new operational management tools. When implementing VMware vRealize operations, vRops 7.5 to monitor a critical production environment, what is the most prudent approach to ensure both operational effectiveness and adherence to data security and access control regulations? Option A. Implement vRops with a phased rollout, establishing granular role-based access controls, RBAC, integrated with the organization's existing identity management system, and defining data retention policies that align with compliance requirements before full operational deployment. Option B. Prioritize the collection of all available performance metrics without initial concern for data security or access controls, assuming that security measures can be retroactively applied once the monitoring system is stable. Option C. Configure vRops with broad administrative access for all IT operations staff to facilitate immediate troubleshooting and data access, and manage user accounts solely within the vRops interface. Option D. Deploy vRops immediately with default administrative credentials to expedite monitoring capabilities, deferring detailed security configurations and compliance checks to a later, unspecified date. The correct answer is A. Implement vRops with a phased rollout, establishing granular role-based access controls, RBAC, integrated with the organization's existing identity management system, and defining data retention policies that align with compliance requirements before full operational deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical operational component, vRealize operations, vRops, for monitoring, is being deployed without adequate consideration for its integration into the existing security and compliance framework. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for monitoring with the long-term implications of data security, access control, and auditability, all of which are governed by stringent regulatory requirements. Failure to address these aspects upfront can lead to significant compliance gaps, security vulnerabilities, and operational inefficiencies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation that prioritizes security and compliance from the outset. This involves defining clear roles and responsibilities for vRops access, implementing robust authentication and authorization mechanisms aligned with organizational policies, and ensuring that data collection and retention practices meet regulatory mandates. This proactive stance is best professional practice because it embeds security and compliance into the operational fabric, minimizing risks and ensuring that the deployed solution is both effective and auditable. It directly addresses the least privilege principle and the need for accountability, which are fundamental to most regulatory frameworks governing data handling and system access. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves deploying VROps with default administrative credentials and broad access permissions. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it violates the principle of least privilege, exposing sensitive operational data to unauthorized access and potential misuse. It creates an audit nightmare, making it impossible to track who performed specific actions, thereby failing to meet accountability requirements mandated by various compliance standards. Another incorrect approach is to defer security and compliance configurations until after the initial deployment is complete. This is professionally unacceptable because it introduces unnecessary risk during the interim period. It can lead to the collection and storage of data in a non-compliant manner, requiring costly and complex remediation efforts later. This approach demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the ongoing nature of security and compliance management. A third incorrect approach is to bypass the integration of VROps with existing identity and access management (IAM) systems, opting for standalone user management within VROps. This creates silos, increases administrative overhead, and makes it difficult to enforce consistent security policies across the environment. From a regulatory perspective, it hinders centralized auditing and can lead to inconsistencies in access control, potentially violating requirements for unified security management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, integrating security and compliance considerations into every stage of the VROps implementation lifecycle. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's data and operations. 2. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities related to monitoring data and access. 3. Designing and implementing security controls, including role-based access control (RBAC), strong authentication and data encryption, in alignment with identified risks and regulatory mandates. 4. Establishing clear operational procedures for managing VROps, including regular audits and access reviews. 5. Ensuring that the implementation plan includes dedicated phases for security and compliance validation before full operational rollout. Question 10. Which approach would be most effective in ensuring ongoing regulatory compliance for virtualized environments managed by VMware vRealize Operations 7? 5. Given the need for both operational agility and robust security. Option A. Disabling vRealize operations monitoring for newly deployed critical systems to accelerate their integration into the production environment. Option B. Conducting comprehensive manual compliance audits only after significant system updates or new service deployments. Option C. Relying on external security consultants to perform periodic ad hoc compliance reviews without integrating their findings into the operational workflow. Option D. Implementing automated compliance checks and alerts within vRealize operations to continuously monitor for deviations from defined baselines and security policies. Correct answer is D. Implementing automated compliance checks and alerts within vRealize operations to continuously monitor for deviations from defined baselines and security policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain regulatory compliance and data integrity. The pressure to deliver functionality quickly can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently expose sensitive data or violate established security protocols. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating these risks without unduly hindering business objectives. The specific regulatory framework for this exam, 5V0-34, 19 VMware vRealize Operations 7. 5. Implies a focus on operational management and monitoring within a VMware environment, which often intersects with data protection and operational security regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy that embeds compliance checks into the operational workflow. This means leveraging vRealize operations capabilities to continuously monitor for deviations from defined compliance baselines and security policies. By establishing automated alerts and reporting mechanisms, administrators can be immediately notified of potential breaches or non-compliant configurations. This approach aligns with the principles of continuous compliance and risk management, ensuring that security and regulatory requirements are not an afterthought but an integral part of the operational lifecycle. This is best professional practice as it minimizes the window of exposure for noncompliance and allows for swift remediation, thereby protecting the organization from potential fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. It directly addresses the need to maintain a secure and compliant operational posture as mandated by general IT governance principles, often reflected in VMware's operational best practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on post-deployment audits is professionally unacceptable. This is because it introduces a significant lag between a potential compliance violation and its detection. During this lag, sensitive data could be compromised or regulatory breaches could occur, leading to severe consequences. This reactive stance fails to meet the standards of proactive risk management and continuous monitoring expected in modern IT operations, and is ethically questionable as it prioritizes speed over diligent oversight. Another incorrect approach is to bypass vRealize operations monitoring for critical systems to expedite deployments. This is a direct violation of operational best practices and potentially regulatory requirements that mandate oversight and control over critical infrastructure. It creates blind spots in the security posture, making the environment vulnerable to undetected threats and noncompliance. This demonstrates a failure to uphold professional responsibility for system integrity and security. Finally, an approach that involves manual verification of compliance settings after each deployment is inefficient and prone to human error. While seemingly diligent, it is not scalable and does not provide the real-time visibility and assurance that automated monitoring offers. This manual process increases the risk of oversight and delays remediation, failing to meet the professional standard of implementing robust and reliable control mechanisms. Professional reasoning. Professionals in IT operations must adopt a mindset of compliance by design and security by design. This involves understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to their operational environment and integrating compliance checks and security controls into every stage of the IT lifecycle, from planning and deployment to ongoing operations and decommissioning. When faced with competing demands, such as rapid deployment versus thorough compliance, professionals should prioritize solutions that automate and integrate these critical functions. This requires a deep understanding of the tools available, such as vRealize operations, and their capabilities in enforcing policies, detecting anomalies, and generating actionable insights. The decision-making process should always involve a risk assessment that quantifies the potential impact of noncompliance and guides the selection of the most effective and efficient mitigation strategies. Question 11. The review process indicates that the VMware vRealize Operations Manager (vROps) cluster is experiencing significant performance degradation, leading to delayed metric collection and slow dashboard loading times. The operations team needs to quickly identify the root cause to restore optimal performance. Which of the following diagnostic approaches represents the most professional and effective first step? Option A. Contact VMware support for immediate assistance, providing them with the observed symptoms and requesting a remote diagnostic session. Option B. Begin a detailed analysis of vROps internal performance metrics, logs, and recent configuration changes within the vROps environment itself. Option C. Proceed with restarting all vROps services and then rebooting each vROps cluster node to clear any potential transient issues. Option D. Immediately initiate a full hardware diagnostic scan on all vROps cluster nodes and prepare for potential hardware component replacement. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a full hardware diagnostic scan on all vROps cluster nodes and prepare for potential hardware component replacement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where a critical system component, the vRealize Operations Manager (vROps) cluster, experiences performance degradation. Professional challenge lies in diagnosing the root cause accurately and efficiently, while minimizing disruption to ongoing operations and ensuring compliance with established operational procedures and potential service level agreements (SLAs). The urgency is amplified by the potential impact on business-critical services that rely on vROps for monitoring and alerting. A hasty or incorrect diagnosis could lead to further system instability, data loss, or prolonged downtime, all of which carry significant operational and reputational risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation leveraging the capabilities of vRops itself. This aligns with best professional practices for IT operations management, emphasizing proactive monitoring, root cause analysis, and informed decision-making. Specifically, utilizing vRops built-in diagnostic tools, such as analyzing performance metrics for the vRops cluster nodes, CPU, memory, disk I/O network, examining vRops internal logs for errors or warnings, and reviewing recent configuration changes or deployments within the vRops environment is crucial. This method ensures that the diagnosis is based on actual system behavior and historical data, leading to a more accurate identification of the bottleneck. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes system stability and service continuity, and professionally responsible by adhering to established troubleshooting methodologies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately assume a hardware failure and initiate hardware replacement without thorough investigation. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the diagnostic process, potentially leading to unnecessary hardware costs and downtime if the issue is software-related or configuration-based. It also fails to adhere to a structured problem-solving methodology, which is a cornerstone of IT operations best practices. Another incorrect approach is to restart vRops services or reboot the vRops nodes without first gathering diagnostic data. Reboots can sometimes resolve transient issues. They are a blunt instrument. Without understanding the underlying cause, a reboot might only provide a temporary fix, masking a deeper problem that will resurface. This approach is professionally deficient as it prioritizes a quick fix over a permanent solution and risks data loss or corruption if the system is not shut down gracefully. It also fails to document the problem and its resolution, hindering future troubleshooting efforts. A third incorrect approach is to escalate the issue to a vendor support team without performing any initial internal diagnostics. While vendor support is valuable, it should be engaged after a reasonable internal investigation has been conducted. This approach is professionally weak because it offloads the initial problem-solving responsibility prematurely, potentially delaying resolution and increasing support costs. It also indicates a lack of confidence in internal diagnostic capabilities and adherence to standard operating procedures for incident management. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should employ a structured incident management and problem-solving framework. This typically involves 1. Incident detection and logging, recognizing the performance degradation and formally logging it. 2. Initial assessment and categorization, determining the severity and impact of the issue. 3. Diagnosis and root cause analysis, systematically gathering data, analyzing metrics and logs, and identifying the underlying cause. This is where leveraging the tools within vRops itself is paramount. 4. Resolution and recovery, implementing the appropriate fix based on the diagnosis. 5. Verification, confirming that the issue is resolved and the system is functioning normally. 6. Post-incident review, documenting the incident, its cause, resolution, and lessons learned to prevent recurrence. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, efficient, and minimize risk to the operational environment. Question 12. The analysis reveals that a VMware vRealize operations administrator is configuring alert thresholds for a newly deployed critical business application. The primary objective is to ensure proactive identification of performance degradations that could impact user experience, while simultaneously avoiding an overwhelming volume of non-actionable alerts. The administrator has access to historical performance data for similar applications, but no specific regulatory guidelines dictate the precise alert thresholds for this particular technology stack. Which approach best balances these competing requirements? Option A. Implement alert thresholds that are extremely high or low, ensuring that only the most severe and obvious problems trigger an alert, thereby minimizing alert volume. Option B. Configure alert thresholds using the default settings provided by VMware vRealize operations for similar object types, assuming these defaults are optimized for general use. Option C. Set alert thresholds based on the administrator's personal experience with other applications, prioritizing a low threshold to catch any potential issue, regardless of its impact. Option D. Establish alert thresholds by analyzing historical performance data to define a baseline of normal behavior and then setting thresholds slightly above or below this baseline to detect significant deviations. Correct answer is D. Establish alert thresholds by analyzing historical performance data to define a baseline of normal behavior, and then setting thresholds slightly above or below this baseline to detect significant deviations. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a VMware vRealize operations, VROps, administrator is tasked with configuring alert thresholds for a critical application. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely alerts to prevent service degradation with the risk of alert fatigue, which can lead to missed critical events. This requires a nuanced understanding of application behavior, performance metrics, and the potential impact of false positives or negatives. The administrator must make a decision that aligns with operational best practices and potentially internal service level agreements, SLAs, without specific regulatory mandates dictating exact threshold values for this particular technology. The correct approach involves a data-driven methodology, starting with establishing a baseline of normal application performance. This baseline is then used to define thresholds that are sensitive enough to detect deviations indicative of potential issues, but not so sensitive that they trigger alerts for normal fluctuations. This iterative process, involving monitoring, tuning, and validation, ensures that alerts are actionable and contribute to maintaining service availability and performance. This represents best professional practice by prioritizing proactive issue detection and resolution, minimizing downtime, and optimizing resource utilization, all of which contribute to the overall stability and reliability of the IT environment. An incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily set thresholds based on personal intuition or generic best practices, without considering the specific application's behavior. This could lead to either too many false alarms, alert fatigue, causing operators to ignore alerts, or too few alerts, allowing critical issues to escalate unnoticed. Another incorrect approach would be to solely rely on default VROps alert configurations without customization. While defaults can be a starting point, they rarely account for the unique performance characteristics and criticality of specific applications within an organization. Failing to tailor alerts to the specific environment increases the risk of operational inefficiency and potential service disruptions. The professional reasoning framework for this situation involves a systematic approach. 1. Understand the application's criticality and its dependencies. 2. Identify key performance indicators, KPI relevant to the application's health and user experience. 3. Establish a baseline of normal performance for these KPIs under various operating conditions. 4. Define alert thresholds based on deviations from the established baseline, considering acceptable performance margins. 5. Implement a feedback loop for continuous monitoring and tuning of alert thresholds based on observed events and operational impact. 6. Document the rationale behind threshold configurations for future reference and auditing. Question 13. Strategic planning requires a proactive approach to identifying and resolving performance degradation in critical virtualized environments. A recent surge in user complaints about slow application response times has been flagged by VMware vRealize operations, with multiple alerts indicating high CPU utilization on several virtual machines. The IT operations team is under pressure to restore optimal performance immediately. Considering the potential for significant business impact, what is the most prudent and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Immediately increase the CPU allocation for all virtual machines reporting high CPU utilization to ensure immediate performance gains. Option B. Advise users to adjust their workflows to accommodate the current system performance until a less urgent time to investigate. Option C. Apply a series of generic performance tuning scripts across the affected hosts without specific analysis of the vRealize operations alerts. Option D. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis using vRealize operations diagnostic tools to pinpoint the specific processes or configurations causing the high CPU usage before implementing any changes. Correct answer is A. Immediately increase the CPU allocation for all virtual machines reporting high CPU utilization to ensure immediate performance gains. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where a critical system's performance is degrading, impacting business operations. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for resolution with the long-term implications of the chosen solution, particularly concerning resource allocation and potential future scalability. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to hasty decisions that might not align with strategic IT goals or regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging vRealize operations capabilities to perform a root cause analysis and then implementing a solution that addresses the underlying issue while considering future capacity planning. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that immediate problems are solved sustainably. From a regulatory perspective, this methodical approach helps maintain system integrity and availability, which can be a requirement for compliance in many industries. It demonstrates due diligence in managing IT infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately scaling up resources without a thorough investigation. This is professionally unsound because it's a reactive measure that doesn't address the root cause and can lead to unnecessary expenditure and inefficient resource utilization. Ethically, it could be seen as a failure to exercise professional judgment and a potential waste of organizational resources. From a regulatory standpoint, it might not satisfy requirements for efficient and effective IT management if a simpler, more targeted fix was available. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the alerts and wait for the issue to resolve itself. This is a clear failure of professional responsibility and a direct violation of IT operational best practices. It can lead to significant business disruption, data loss, and reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates negligence. Regulatory frameworks often mandate proactive monitoring and incident response, making this approach non-compliant. Third incorrect approach is to implement a quick fix that only temporarily alleviates the symptoms without understanding the cause. While it might restore immediate functionality, it leaves the system vulnerable to recurring issues and can mask deeper problems. This is professionally deficient as it prioritizes short-term relief over long-term stability and can lead to technical debt. It may also fail to meet regulatory requirements for robust and reliable systems. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured problem-solving methodology. This involves 1. Understanding the business impact of the issue, 2. Utilizing monitoring and analytics tools, like vRealize operations for comprehensive diagnostics, 3. Identifying the root cause, not just the symptoms, 4. Evaluating potential solutions based on effectiveness, efficiency, cost, and long-term impact, 5. Implementing the chosen solution with proper change management, 6. Verifying the resolution and documenting the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with both operational needs and organizational strategy. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in CPU utilization and latency for several critical applications following a recent infrastructure upgrade. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate next step in addressing this situation? Option A. Conduct a detailed impact analysis using vRealize operations to identify the root cause of the performance degradation, correlating VROps metrics with the changes introduced by the upgrade. Option B. Initiate a broad system-wide performance tuning exercise across all applications to preemptively address potential issues. Option C. Immediately revert the infrastructure upgrade to restore normal performance levels. Option D. Review the vendor's release notes for the upgraded components to determine if similar issues have been reported by other users. The correct answer is C. Immediately revert the infrastructure upgrade to restore normal performance levels. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing the impact of a critical infrastructure change on a VMware vRealize operations, VROps, environment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for operational efficiency and modernization with the imperative to maintain system stability, performance, and compliance. Without a thorough impact assessment, changes could lead to unforeseen performance degradations, security vulnerabilities, or service disruptions, all of which carry significant regulatory and business risks. The professional must exercise careful judgment to identify potential risks and plan mitigation strategies proactively. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that leverages vROps capabilities to analyze the proposed changes. This includes understanding the dependencies of the affected virtual machines and applications, evaluating current performance baselines, and simulating the potential effects of the upgrade on resource utilization, network traffic, and application response times. This proactive analysis aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that changes are implemented in a controlled manner, minimizing risk to business operations. From a regulatory perspective, this approach supports compliance with operational resilience and change management requirements, which often mandate risk assessment and mitigation before implementing significant infrastructure modifications. It demonstrates due diligence in safeguarding the integrity and availability of IT services. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the upgrade without any prior analysis or testing is a direct violation of sound IT governance principles and likely contravenes regulatory requirements for change management and operational risk management. This approach introduces an unacceptable level of risk, potentially leading to service outages, data integrity issues, or security breaches, which could result in regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Performing a superficial review of the vRealize dashboards without a deep dive into the specific metrics and dependencies related to the planned upgrade is insufficient. While it might identify obvious issues, it fails to uncover subtle but critical impacts on performance or resource contention that could arise post-upgrade. This lack of thoroughness can lead to unexpected problems, demonstrating a failure to exercise due diligence and potentially violating the spirit of regulatory mandates for comprehensive risk assessment. Relying solely on vendor documentation for impact assessment without validating the information against the specific operational context and performance characteristics of the organization's environment as monitored by vRealize is also a flawed approach. Vendor documentation provides general guidance, but real-world impact is highly dependent on the unique configuration, workload, and usage patterns of the specific deployment. This reliance on external, unverified information can lead to a false sense of security and a failure to identify environment-specific risks, which is a professional and ethical failing in managing IT infrastructure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to change management, beginning with a clear understanding of the proposed change and its objectives. This should be followed by a thorough risk assessment, leveraging available tools like vRealize to gather data and analyze potential impacts. The assessment should consider performance, security, availability, and compliance aspects. Mitigation strategies should be developed for identified risks, and a rollback plan should be in place. Finally, changes should be implemented in a controlled manner, with post-implementation monitoring and validation to ensure successful integration and continued operational stability. This systematic process ensures that decisions are data-driven, risks are managed effectively, and regulatory obligations are met. Question 15. During the evaluation of a proposed change to a VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 management pack that is intended to enhance data collection for a new cloud service, the development team asserts that the change is minor and poses no significant risk, recommending immediate deployment to meet a tight deadline. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Implement the change during a scheduled maintenance window, relying on the development team's expertise to monitor for any immediate problems. Option B. Proceed with the deployment, but only after the development team provides a detailed technical explanation of the changes and their expected behavior. Option C. Initiate a formal change management process that includes a thorough risk assessment, impact analysis, and review by operations and security teams before deployment. Option D. Deploy the change immediately based on the development team's assurance, with a plan to roll back if any issues arise. Correct answer is C. Initiate a formal change management process that includes a thorough risk assessment, impact analysis, and review by operations and security teams before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain system stability and security. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established procedures, increasing the risk of unforeseen issues. The professional challenge lies in making a judgment call that upholds operational integrity without unduly hindering business agility. This requires a thorough understanding of the potential impact of changes and the ability to articulate risks and mitigation strategies effectively. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured review process that prioritizes risk assessment and impact analysis. This aligns with best practices in IT service management and operational governance, which emphasize proactive identification and mitigation of potential problems. By engaging relevant stakeholders, including security and operations teams, and documenting the proposed changes and their potential consequences, the team demonstrates due diligence. This approach ensures that any deployment is well understood, its risks are managed, and contingency plans are in place, thereby safeguarding the integrity and availability of the vRealize operations environment. This adheres to the principle of responsible change management, a cornerstone of maintaining a secure and reliable IT infrastructure. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the deployment without a formal risk assessment or stakeholder consultation represents a significant failure in professional judgment and operational governance. This bypasses critical checks and balances designed to prevent disruptions. It creates a high probability of introducing unintended consequences, such as performance degradation, security vulnerabilities, or configuration conflicts, which could impact the entire vRealize operations deployment and its dependent services. This approach disregards the established protocols for change management, which are in place to protect the organization's IT assets and operational continuity. Implementing the change based solely on the developer's assurance, without independent verification or a review of the proposed modifications, is also professionally unsound. While developer confidence is valuable, it does not substitute for a comprehensive technical review by operations and security personnel. This approach places undue trust in a single source and neglects the collective responsibility for system stability and security. It fails to acknowledge that developers, while experts in their code, may not have a complete understanding of the broader operational environment or the potential cascading effects of their changes. Relying on a rollback plan as the sole mitigation strategy without a proactive risk assessment is a reactive rather than a proactive stance. While rollback capabilities are essential, they should be a last resort, not a primary justification for bypassing thorough pre-deployment analysis. This approach assumes that a rollback will always be successful and without its own set of complications, which is not always the case. It prioritizes speed over certainty and fails to adequately address the potential for immediate or subtle negative impacts that might not be easily reversible. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a structured, risk-based approach to change management. This involves 1. Understanding the proposed change and its objectives. 2. Identifying all potential risks and their impact on the system and business operation. 3. Consulting with all relevant stakeholders, e.g., operations, security, development, business units. 4. Evaluating mitigation strategies and contingency plans. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale for proceeding or deferring the change. 6. Ensuring that any approved changes are implemented with appropriate monitoring and validation. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's operational and security objectives. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new feature for the vRealize operations environment offers significant potential for improved operational efficiency, but its integration requires substantial configuration changes and may impact existing monitoring thresholds. From a stakeholder perspective, how should the implementation of this feature be prioritized and managed to ensure maximum benefit with minimal disruption? Option A. Implement the feature in a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group of critical applications, accompanied by rigorous monitoring of performance and resource utilization using vRealize operations and a clear rollback plan. Option B. Prioritize the feature based solely on the projected cost savings identified in the analysis, without a detailed assessment of the operational impact or integration complexity. Option C. Deploy the feature immediately across the entire environment to realize the potential efficiency gains as quickly as possible, addressing any issues that arise reactively. Option D. Postpone the implementation indefinitely until all potential risks, however minor, are completely eliminated and a perfect integration strategy is guaranteed. The correct answer is A. Implement the feature in a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group of critical applications, accompanied by rigorous monitoring of performance and resource utilization using vRealize operations, and a clear rollback plan. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations. balancing the immediate need for a new feature with the long-term implications of its implementation, particularly concerning resource allocation and potential technical debt. The challenge lies in the stakeholder perspective, where different groups have competing priorities and varying levels of understanding regarding the technical complexities and associated risks. A careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions align with both business objectives and sound operational principles, as mandated by the VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 framework, which emphasizes efficient resource management and proactive problem identification. The correct approach, focusing on a phased rollout with comprehensive monitoring and validation, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT deployment, emphasizing risk mitigation and continuous improvement. By implementing a pilot program and closely observing performance metrics within vRealize operations, the team can validate the benefits against the costs and identify any unforeseen issues before a full-scale deployment. This proactive stance minimizes disruption and ensures that the investment in the new feature delivers tangible value without compromising the stability or performance of the existing environment. This approach is implicitly supported by the operational efficiency and monitoring capabilities inherent in vRealize Operations 7.5, which are designed to provide visibility into system health and performance. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate deployment without adequate testing or monitoring would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to performance degradation, increased operational costs due to unforeseen issues, and a failure to realize the projected benefits, thereby violating the implicit expectation of responsible resource management. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the perceived cost savings without a thorough assessment of the operational impact, ignores the qualitative benefits and potential risks, leading to a myopic decision that could jeopardize system stability. A third incorrect approach, delaying the implementation indefinitely due to minor, unquantified risks, fails to capitalize on potential business advantages and demonstrates a lack of proactive problem solving, which is contrary to the spirit of operational optimization. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves thorough stakeholder engagement, clear definition of success metrics, a risk assessment process, and a phased implementation strategy. This framework should leverage the capabilities of vRealize operations for continuous monitoring and validation throughout the lifecycle of any new deployment. Question 17. Operational review demonstrates that several VMware vRealize Operations 7.5 components have identified security vulnerabilities, some with publicly available exploit information and others without. The IT operations team is concerned about the potential impact of these vulnerabilities on the stability and security of the virtualized environment, considering the need to maintain operational continuity and adhere to security best practices. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible approach to managing these vulnerabilities? Option A. Immediately deploy patches for all identified vulnerabilities, prioritizing those with publicly available exploit information, and schedule a comprehensive review of the patching process for less critical systems after the immediate threats are addressed. Option B. Implement a policy to only patch vulnerabilities that are flagged as critical by the vulnerability scanning tool, regardless of their exploitability or the business criticality of the affected vRealize operations component, to streamline the patching process. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment for each identified vulnerability, considering the criticality of the affected vRealize operations component, the likelihood of exploitation, and the potential business impact, to prioritize patching efforts and develop a risk-based remediation plan. Option D. Defer patching for vulnerabilities that do not have publicly available exploit information, focusing immediate efforts on those with known exploits, and consider patching the others only when they become more widely known or when a scheduled maintenance window allows. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy patches for all identified vulnerabilities, prioritizing those with publicly available exploit information, and schedule a comprehensive review of the patching process for less critical systems after the immediate threats are addressed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the practicalities of resource allocation and operational efficiency. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the risk posed by unpatched vulnerabilities in a production environment, where downtime or performance degradation can have significant business impact. A purely reactive approach to patching, driven solely by the discovery of a vulnerability, can lead to rushed deployments, increased errors, and potential service disruptions. Conversely, an overly cautious approach that delays patching indefinitely without proper risk justification can expose the organization to significant security breaches and regulatory noncompliance. The professional must navigate these competing demands, ensuring that risk assessment is thorough, data-driven, and aligned with organizational policies and regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic risk assessment process. This begins with identifying and cataloging all assets, understanding their criticality to business operations, and then assessing the potential impact of a security vulnerability on those assets. For VMware vRealize Operation 7. 5. This means understanding which components are deployed, their configuration, and their role in the overall virtualized infrastructure. The risk assessment should consider the likelihood of a vulnerability being exploited and the potential business impact, e.g., data loss, service interruption, reputational damage, regulatory fines. Based on this assessment, a prioritized patching strategy can be developed, focusing on the highest-risk vulnerabilities first. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively, critical systems are protected, and the organization remains compliant with relevant regulations by demonstrating due diligence in managing security risks. This aligns with the principles of risk management embedded in IT governance frameworks and cybersecurity best practices, which emphasize a proactive, risk-based approach to security. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately patch all discovered vulnerabilities without any prior risk assessment. This can lead to unnecessary downtime, resource strain, and the introduction of new issues due to rushed deployments. It fails to prioritize effectively, potentially disrupting less critical systems while leaving more vulnerable critical systems exposed for longer periods if patching resources are exhausted. This approach is ethically questionable, as it does not demonstrate prudent management of organizational resources or a considered approach to risk. Another incorrect approach is to ignore vulnerabilities that do not have publicly known exploits. This is a dangerous and ethically unsound practice. The absence of a known exploit does not equate to the absence of risk. Sophisticated attackers may discover and exploit zero-day vulnerabilities before they are publicly disclosed or patched. Relying on the lack of a known exploit is a failure of due diligence and exposes the organization to significant, unmitigated risk, which could lead to regulatory penalties for failing to implement reasonable security measures. A third incorrect approach is to delay patching indefinitely for systems that are deemed low priority, without a formal risk acceptance process. This implies a lack of ongoing monitoring and reassessment. Business priorities and threat landscapes change, and what was once low priority might become high priority. Without a defined process for accepting residual risk, this approach can lead to a gradual erosion of the security posture of the environment, making it more susceptible to attack over time. This demonstrates a failure to adhere to ongoing security management principles and could be seen as a breach of professional responsibility to maintain a secure environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk management framework. This involves 1. Asset identification and classification. Understand what needs protection and its business value. 2. Threat and vulnerability identification. Continuously monitor for potential threats and system weaknesses. 3. Risk assessment. Analyze the likelihood and impact of threats exploiting vulnerabilities. 4. Risk treatment. Develop and implement strategies to mitigate, transfer, accept, or avoid risks. 5. Monitoring and review. Regularly reassess risks and the effectiveness of controls. For VMware vRealize Operation 7. 5. This means integrating vulnerability management into the operational lifecycle, ensuring that patching decisions are informed by a clear understanding of business impact and regulatory compliance requirements. Question 18. Regulatory review indicates that a critical aspect of maintaining compliance within a VMware vRealize Operation 7. 5 environment involves a robust and actionable risk assessment process. Considering the operational realities of managing a dynamic IT infrastructure, which of the following approaches best aligns with both regulatory mandates and effective risk management practices? Option A. Periodically conduct a manual risk assessment, document findings, and then archive the report without direct integration into vRops operational workflows or alert configurations. Option B. Leverage vRops continuous monitoring and analytics to identify, quantify, and prioritize risks, and then integrate these findings directly into vRops configurations, alert tuning, and remediation workflows to drive proactive risk mitigation. Option C. Implement a comprehensive risk assessment framework, but defer any configuration changes or remediation actions in vRops until a formal audit is scheduled to minimize operational disruption. Option D. Rely solely on default vRops alerts and dashboards, assuming they adequately cover all potential risks without further customization or analysis. The correct answer is A. Periodically conduct a manual risk assessment, document findings, and then archive the report without direct integration into vRops operational workflows or alert configurations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between maintaining operational efficiency and adhering to regulatory requirements for risk assessment within a VMware vRealize operations, vRops 7.5 environment. The challenge lies in ensuring that the risk assessment process is not merely a perfunctory exercise but a robust, ongoing activity that directly informs security posture and compliance. The need to balance resource allocation for risk assessment against other operational demands, while still meeting the stringent requirements of the specified regulatory framework, assumed to be U.S. federal regulations for IT security and compliance, given the exam context, makes this a complex decision point. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves integrating risk assessment findings directly into the vRops configuration and operational workflows. This means using the data and insights generated by vRops monitoring and analytics capabilities to identify, quantify, and prioritize risks. Subsequently, these prioritized risks should drive actionable remediation steps, such as adjusting alert thresholds, creating custom dashboards for risk visualization, or even triggering automated remediation actions where appropriate. This aligns with best practices in IT risk management, which emphasize a continuous feedback loop between assessment, mitigation, and monitoring. From a regulatory perspective, this approach demonstrates a proactive and documented commitment to managing risks, which is often a key requirement for compliance frameworks like NIST or FedRAMP, ensuring that security controls are effective and that potential vulnerabilities are addressed in a timely manner. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to treat risk assessment as a standalone, infrequent activity, disconnected from the day-to-day operations and configuration of vRops. This fails to leverage the real-time monitoring and analytical power of vRops, rendering the risk assessment static and potentially obsolete. It also creates a significant regulatory failure, as many compliance frameworks mandate continuous risk management and the ability to demonstrate ongoing risk mitigation efforts. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on generic, out-of-the-box vRops alerts without tailoring them to the specific risk profile of the organization. While these alerts provide a baseline, they may not capture the unique threats or vulnerabilities relevant to the specific environment. This can lead to missed risks or an overwhelming number of irrelevant alerts, hindering effective risk management and potentially violating regulatory requirements that demand a risk-based approach tailored to the organization's specific context. A third incorrect approach is to document risk assessment findings, but fail to implement any corresponding changes or actions within vRops or the underlying infrastructure. This creates a gap between identified risks and actual mitigation efforts, which is a critical compliance and security failure. Regulators expect to see evidence of action taken based on risk assessments, not just documentation of potential issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach that leverages the full capabilities of vRops for continuous monitoring and assessment. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's data and operations. 2. Configuring vRops to monitor for indicators of risk relevant to those requirements. 3. Regularly reviewing and analyzing the risk assessment outputs generated by vRops. 4. Prioritizing identified risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. 5. Developing and implementing actionable remediation plans, utilizing vROps capabilities for automation and workflow integration where feasible. 6. Documenting all steps taken, including risk identification, assessment, mitigation, and ongoing monitoring, to provide auditable evidence of compliance and effective risk management. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new feature is being considered for VMware vRealize Operations 7. 5. Given that no specific regulatory framework has been explicitly mandated for this deployment, which of the following approaches to conducting the impact assessment is most professionally sound and ethically responsible? Option A. Conduct a basic impact assessment based on general IT best practices, without actively investigating or considering any specific or potential regulatory obligations. Option B. Proceed with the impact assessment by identifying potential regulatory compliance requirements that could be relevant to the intended use of vROps and the data it will manage, and assess the feature's impact against these potential requirements. Option C. Assume that the absence of a specified regulatory framework means no compliance considerations are necessary for this feature's impact assessment. Option D. Focus the impact assessment exclusively on the technical performance improvements and resource utilization, changes the new feature will introduce to the vROps environment. The correct answer is D. Focus the impact assessment exclusively on the technical performance improvements and resource utilization, changes the new feature will introduce to the vROps environment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the impact assessment for a new feature in VMware vRealize Operations, vROps 7.5 needs to be conducted without a clear understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing its deployment and operation. In a professional setting, especially within regulated industries, failing to identify and adhere to applicable laws and guidelines can lead to significant compliance issues, security vulnerabilities, and operational disruptions. The absence of a defined regulatory context forces a reliance on general best practices, which may not be sufficient to meet specific legal or industry mandates. This ambiguity requires a proactive and thorough approach to ensure that the assessment, even in a vacuum, considers potential impacts that would be relevant under various hypothetical regulatory landscapes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves identifying potential regulatory compliance requirements that could impact the vROps deployment based on the intended use case and the data it will manage. This aligns with professional best practices by prioritizing a proactive and risk mitigation strategy. By considering potential regulatory frameworks, e.g., data privacy laws, industry-specific regulations, the assessment can identify areas where the new feature might introduce compliance risks. This allows for the implementation of controls and configurations within vROps to meet these potential requirements before deployment, thereby preventing future noncompliance. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible technology deployment, which are ethical imperatives in IT operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the impact assessment solely based on technical performance metrics without considering any external regulatory or compliance implications. This fails to acknowledge the broader context in which IT systems operate. Many industries are subject to specific regulations, e.g., GDPR for data privacy, HIPAA for healthcare data, that dictate how data is collected, stored, processed, and secured. Ignoring these potential requirements means the vROps deployment could inadvertently violate these laws, leading to substantial fines, legal action, and reputational damage. This approach represents a significant ethical and professional failure by neglecting the responsibility to ensure compliance. Another incorrect approach is to assume that the absence of explicit regulatory guidance means no such requirements exist. This is a dangerous assumption in professional IT practice. Regulatory landscapes are complex and constantly evolving. It is the responsibility of IT professionals to be aware of and investigate potential compliance obligations relevant to their organization's operations and the data handled by their systems. Relying on a lack of explicit instruction to bypass due diligence is a dereliction of professional duty and can lead to severe consequences if regulatory scrutiny later reveals noncompliance. This approach demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to uphold professional standards of care. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, they must acknowledge the ambiguity and the inherent risks associated with operating without a defined regulatory framework. Second, they should proactively research and identify potential regulatory domains that could apply based on the organization's industry, geographical location, and the nature of the data managed by VR ops. This might involve consulting with legal counsel or compliance officers. Third, the impact assessment should then be conducted with these potential regulatory requirements in mind, evaluating how the new feature might affect compliance in each identified area. Finally, the findings should be documented, and recommendations for controls or configurations to mitigate potential compliance risks should be made, even if the specific regulatory framework remains unconfirmed. This iterative and cautious approach ensures that the organization is prepared for potential compliance obligations and minimizes future risks. Question 20. The assessment process reveals that a critical production service has experienced an unexpected outage. The vRealize Operations 7.5 environment is reporting significant performance degradation impacting this service. The on-call engineer has identified a configuration drift in a key vSphere component that is the likely cause. To restore service immediately, the engineer must revert this configuration. Given the urgency, what is the most professionally responsible course of action regarding the change management process for this corrective action? Option A. Revert the configuration to restore service and consider the change complete, as no new configuration was introduced, only a reversion to a known state. Option B. Revert the configuration to restore service and bypass all formal change management documentation and approval processes, as the situation was an emergency. Option C. Revert the configuration to restore service and immediately initiate the formal change request process for retrospective approval, ensuring all details of the emergency change are documented. Option D. Revert the configuration to restore service and decide to document the change later if time permits, prioritizing other urgent tasks. The correct answer is C. Revert the configuration to restore service and immediately initiate the formal change request process for retrospective approval, ensuring all details of the emergency change are documented. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for immediate issue resolution with the requirement for thorough, documented change management. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to bypassing established procedures, which, while seemingly efficient in the short term, introduces significant risks. These risks include the potential for introducing new, undocumented issues, difficulty in future troubleshooting, and non-compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulatory requirements for audit trails and change control. The professional challenge lies in making a judgment call that prioritizes both operational stability and adherence to governance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves acknowledging the urgency while still adhering to the core principles of change management. This means performing the necessary immediate actions to restore service, but immediately following up with the formal documentation and approval process. This demonstrates best professional practice by ensuring that even emergency changes are logged, reviewed, and understood. This aligns with the principles of ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, and common governance frameworks that emphasize traceability, accountability, and risk mitigation. By documenting the emergency change retrospectively, the team ensures that the incident response is captured, lessons learned can be applied, and the system state is accurately reflected for future audits and operational management. This approach balances immediate needs with long-term operational integrity and compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to document the change at all represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It creates an invisible change within the environment, making it impossible to track what was modified, why, and by whom. This directly violates audit trail requirements and makes compliance with any regulatory framework mandating change control impossible. It also severely hampers future troubleshooting efforts, as the system's history will be incomplete. Implementing the change without any form of retrospective approval, even if documented later, can also be problematic. While the documentation might exist, the lack of prior or immediate post-change approval signifies a potential bypass of necessary risk assessment and authorization steps. This could lead to unauthorized modifications being made, even if they are later documented. Depending on the specific regulatory environment, This could be seen as a failure to maintain adequate internal controls and governance. Performing the change and deciding to document it later, if time permits, introduces a high degree of risk. This approach prioritizes immediate action over procedural integrity and relies on the assumption that time will become available for documentation. In a busy operational environment, later often never arrives, leading to the same consequences as failing to document at all. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to the established governance processes and a potential disregard for the importance of a complete operational record. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a document as you go or document immediately after philosophy, even for emergency changes. This involves 1. Assess the urgency and impact of the issue. 2. Implement the quickest, safest solution to restore service. 3. Simultaneously or immediately after, initiate the documentation process for the change. 4. Seek retrospective approval for the emergency change, explaining the circumstances. 5. Conduct a post-incident review to identify process improvements. This framework ensures that operational continuity is maintained while upholding governance, auditability, and risk management principles.